Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Women in EVs. We're so happy you could join us today. My name is Devin DeLibero, and I am the program coordinator on the Drive Green team at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. So anything EV related is really what I'm into. And we hold these webinars every so often to just really hold space for women in this, not this field, but in this let's say category, because a lot of times these discussions that we have are dominated by men, so we just want to make sure women have all the time in the world to ask whatever questions they want to ask. So I will be moderating today, and then really it's just kind of a free for all. So if you want to put questions in the chat, you can do that. If you want to raise your hand to ask questions, you can also do that. We will get to everybody. With me on the call today, he's not a woman, but we like him anyways, is my coworker Ezra. So he will be helping me with like some questions in the chat, and he'll be like chiming in here and there as he sees fit. So before we start opening up to questions, we do have a few folks on the call that we asked to be panelists. So I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves, say what car they have, and if there's anything that you want to say briefly about like how much you like your car or what made you make the switch, anything like that. And I bet she can guess, but I'm going to make Amy go first. Don't mind.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amy. I bought a used Tesla back in 2020, and I'm absolutely obsessed. And I also, because she will ask, currently my rims are painted blue, blue sparkle. We went from bright orange, like safety orange, and now we're in blue. I like to switch them up.
I'm really excited about that. That sounds awesome.
I'll show.
Okay, Brenda, do you mind introducing yourself next?
Sure. Brenda, I have a Chevy Bolt, and I've had a Bolt for about 5 years now, which I leased at first because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it enough to keep, and then I subsequently bought it. But the reason I started thinking about it was because my employer actually installed charging stations at work and was encouraging employees to look into EVs, and so that really just prompted me to look into the financials of it, and then I was hooked.
Perfect. Julie, would you mind going next?
Hi, I'm Julie Johnson, and I have a Kia Niro EV, which we leased probably about, I think, 3.5 years ago, which since have bought it out for my teens. And I've actually been in electrification probably in the business for about 6, maybe 7 years, but on the big truck side. So I'm on the commercial fleet side of the business. So I was evangelizing the whole, big truck movement, and was just doing a lot of, education and driving big vehicles. And so when I had the first opportunity to jump into one, I did. And I'm actually super excited about Amy's story too with the Tesla, because I'm supposed to be buying a new one now or leasing, and I just can't make a decision on what to do next. But excited to share my journey with you all. I do push this car to the limits. Well, my limits for now.
And the new Kias I love the remodel. I don't know if you've noticed, they're very sleek looking. All right. So last, not least, we'll go to Jana, if you don't mind.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jana, and I originally bought a Chevy Bolt back in 2017. I had run into someone in town, just like stepped out of a coffee shop, and she was there, and she had a Chevy Bolt, introduced me to it, and I thought, oh, that'll be my next car. And then my current car, which was a Toyota Prius, died like immediately. So I was like, okay, I guess this is it. So I had a Chevy Bolt for several years, and then traded it in and got a Kia Niro EV. The reason I got the Kia Niro is because it has a heat pump. So I'm finding I don't lose as much range in the winter. And I love it. I am constantly fascinated by how far the cars will go. I drove from Burlington, Vermont to Melrose, which is just north of Boston, in one charge. So it's just constantly amazes me.
Largest, deepest, biggest by volume body of water. So
Okay. So now that everyone's introduced themselves, I just want to open it up. Does anybody have any questions from the audience? You can either put it in the chat or just simply unmute and ask it if you need to. I'm going to go first to kick it off. So, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the federal tax credit, but it is up to $7,500 in an incentive, which is really great. But there's a lot of like different requirements that you yourself have to have, and the car also has to have. One thing that's changing though, as the first of next year comes around, is that the tax credit is no longer going to be based on your personal tax liability. It'll be based on, you can do it as like a point of sale rebate. So the dealer can take on that tax liability for you. So it's really, for me, super exciting because I feel like it's a great equalizer because it's like not just for like upper middle class folks anymore. It could be for anybody who potentially is interested in this. So with that being said, Julie, you said you're interested in a new car. I'm wondering if that has affected anything and like what cars you're considering.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to sort of understand what's happening in the market, because some dealers, and I'm still not sure if it's by car, there are still some at point of sale getting that discount, which is really interesting. So we've been looking at an Audi. I mean, I've been kind of combing the market because before I got the Nero, I combed the used market because I really was like, I want to get a used EV. But then I know that I live in California. I live in Northern California, and I drive to Sacramento for work. And there weren't a lot of cars that had DC fast chargers on them, so it didn't have the capability to take a DC fast charge. And I thought that would be a bit challenging for me. So kind of going back into the market now, there's so many more options, and of course, taking advantage of either you get the tax credit, but there's limitations on your earnings as a family or an individual. But then I found out also that there's a potential at the point of sale. So the fact that that's coming back in again, it does make a difference for sure. But what I'm kind of looking at right now, it kind of is a price range for me. So if I'm going to lease, what can I get into that's going to be the right lease payment for me? I'm interested in purchasing a car, but then I also kind of know that I'm probably going to be a bit of an EV junkie, I guess. I don't know if you want to call it that, or an EV fanatic, just because I'm in the business, and I know that I'm probably going to want to keep trying out a new model, every 2 or 3 years. So, I'm sort of in this flux of like, what am I going to do next? I do. And something that's really awesome too, is because I travel, I have the opportunity to rent EVs. And so I've been to rent, and then also just Ubering and lifting around. So I have gotten an opportunity to try a lot of cars that way, sitting as a passenger, which is sometimes a really important thing to know too, is, how are the people in the back of my car going to feel? It's funny because I never probably thought about these things as much, even when I was driving combustion vehicles, and I used to drive a lot when I was in healthcare. So it's just really interesting that my attention around decisions and what car I want to purchase. Price is really important, but I'm also taking these other things into consideration. And we drive from the Bay Area to Tahoe. So I take the Kia there in the wintertime a lot. And I mean, it's a long drive. And so when I say I push the car, I think I push it pretty hard. Like Janice said, the Kia, I was told, has one of the best engineering teams in the industry anyway. So I'm always kind of partial to Kia for sure. But I think they're all elevating up there. And so, yeah, I haven't decided yet because I just can't decide. So I'm dragging it out a little bit. So some days I don't have a car and I'm like, I need a car, but it is what it is, right?
Well, you got lots to choose from. And yeah, I do think that it's really cool because, leasing is a great option. I do want to clarify a point that you made earlier, which was that you can get this as like point of sale with some dealerships. So what that means right now is something a little different. So there's two federal tax credits. There's one for like an individual like you and I, and then there's the commercial one. And the commercial one actually provides a leasing loophole for folks. So what that means is like the you don't own the car when you lease it. The leasing agency owns it, or like the dealership or whomever. So they don't have all of the different qualifications that the individual buyer would have on their car and on themselves when it comes to getting an electric vehicle with an incentive. Like they don't have the battery things that come with the individual incentive, and they don't have the personal tax liability. It's like not a big deal. So they can choose as a commercial entity to roll that $7,500 into the leasing price of the vehicle. So that is like
Oh, that's awesome to know.
yeah.
I was really curious. Nobody's explained it to me. So that's really helpful to, so it's the difference between leasing and purchasing. It's kind of,
Right. And
okay.
and so if you are like purchasing on like, you're doing the regular clean vehicle tax credit, there's a list on the IRS website. Basically it says like here's all the cars that qualify based on like there's battery qualifications and all these other things and final assembly location qualifications. But that doesn't apply to the commercial clean vehicle tax credit. And so that's what cars are eligible for that when it comes to lease. But it is up to the manufacturer and the dealer actually to decide whether or not they want to include that in the lease price. It's like I know Tesla wasn't doing it for a while. I don't know if they still aren't. Okay, I've talked too much, so let me just go to the chat. Okay,
While you're looking at the chat, can I ask Julie a quick question?
of course.
So Julie, when you rent cars, rent EVs, do they expect you to return them at 100% charge? Because that would be impossible.
No,
Okay,
no.
how does that
As of
work?
now, it's free. It's sort of free fuel. Because yeah, it's they're really trying to promote utilization of the vehicles. So and Hertz is kind of leading in the pack right now. So I think the challenge for all of them is really infrastructure, which is actually the space that I'm in now. I've been on the OEM side and now I'm on the infrastructure side. So their real goal of these companies now is to start getting the EVs out to make sure that they can have them fully charged when they send them out, because that's really critical, because I know there's some challenges in certain airports with that. But bringing them back, it's sort of a free fuel. And I drove a natural gas rental car way back in the day, and it was the same thing. So there's a little bit of a benefit there. And it's a great way to try out. I've driven a Polestar, which was really fun. It's a very sexy car. But but they're working on it and in the rental space for sure. And I know it's a great way to get them out to consumers to try too, when you have the opportunity.
Cool. All right, so we have a question from Priscilla in the chat, and it says, I just got a 2013 Nissan Leaf, and my mom's main concern for me is as a young woman is my safety during public charging, especially at night. I charge at home and at work as much as possible, but I have a pretty short range and need public charging sometimes. Thoughts and or experiences?
I can speak up on that one. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the only time I've ever been uncomfortable publicly charging was at a rest stop on the highway late at night one time when the charger was like located really far away from the building. And in that case, I just, looked around to make sure that no one was near me or whatever when I was plugging in, and then sat in the car and waited while I was charging rather than going in. But other than that, I don't think that it's been an issue for me. I mean, I use public chargers all the time. I don't have the ability to charge at home. And they're usually in very public places that are well lit, and it's not really an issue.
Is there anything on the apps that helps you figure out like if it's a more safe place to charge or anything like that?
On PlugShare, people can leave comments about the charger. Usually it's more, about if it's out of service or something like that. But and I haven't seen anybody leaving comments about the location being uncomfortable or anything like that. But that would be where you would look for something like that.
Amy?
I concur. I've never really had a weird experience. I was a little bit worried about that because I have had to charge if I'm traveling. I'm more than likely charging when it's dark out, either super early in the morning or super late at night. Again, most of them are super public, especially lately. It seems like there's a lot more traffic going to these locations. So even if one person maybe is a little unsavory, you're always with a group of people. In my experience, I've never been that uncomfortable. And the nice thing is if at some point, you charge, if you need to go 10-15 minutes and go to another location, you could do that as well if you needed.
Priscilla, if just in case you want to unmute, is there anything else you want to ask?
Yeah, I think, well, something I was curious about, I saw like an ad for some sort of adapter where you could like potentially back out and like not have to unplug if you were in an emergency situation. Has anyone ever heard of that or tried it?
I feel like I was Instagram ad targeted for something like that, but I just remember seeing it and that was it.
Okay, same. I mean, I'm just trying to give peace of mind to my mom
Yeah.
because she's like, protective. So maybe, yeah, and I don't know if PlugShare has anything about lighting. That's another one of our concerns is just make sure it's well lit and not in a back, like isolated corner, essentially.
Emily, I saw you had your hand raised.
Two things. I want to say when we drove to North Carolina from here, from Massachusetts in January, we stopped at truck stops because they had a lot of chargers, both Tesla and the other ones, the level 2. And they're always really busy and I think a safe place to stop. And you can also get food there, which is nice. And also we own an Ioniq 5 and we absolutely adore it. I think Diane, you were thinking about maybe buying one, and I have only the very highest recommendation for he's in, let's see, I'm trying to think of the name of the dealership. It's in Holyoke. And when we bought ours a year ago, it was one of the few that had models, and they've had the most of any in New England. And our Maria was our sales rep, and she's been doing it for 42 years. And it was just a fabulous, fabulous process. And it's not a problem buying something that far away because it doesn't need service. It just needs, the brakes to be checked. So I highly recommend. I'm just looking up what the name of the dealership is. I should know it, but we don't go there very much. It's called Gary Rome Hyundai dealership, and it's right off the 93, I think. But Maria Page was our Bruno or Page was our sales rep, and I only have the highest things to say. They were fabulous.
Well, that transitions nicely because I was going to go to Diane's question next, but also I do love the Ionics. They're my favorite. Ezra knows that they're my favorite, and I am trying to convince him to get one because he was thinking about getting a new car recently. So that's good to know. But Diane's question is, she says, I'm interested in an all-wheel drive vehicle like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 or 6. When I looked at them online, it looked like the tax credit was for the full 7,500 for the 2023 models, but less for the 2024 models. Is that accurate? So I don't know off the top of my head because I haven't looked at the 2024 models yet, but I can guess what's happening. So with the federal tax credit, the federal tax credit is actually divided into two different buckets. There is the battery component bucket and then the battery mineral bucket, and each is worth the equal $3,750. The car has to meet all of the standards that are increasing every year in order to qualify for the federal tax credit. But you can get like the car can reach the battery component bucket, but not the battery mineral bucket, and vice versa. So that means that like you could only get maybe $3,750 for that car, where in the previous year you could get the full $7,500. It's just based on like just so many different rules. There's just a lot of different rules when it comes to this. And so I know that the percentage for 2023 model year was 40%, and I believe it's jumping to 50% for both buckets. So like it has to be manufactured in the United States or from a country with a free trade agreement with the United States and or something like that. So that could be why it's a little bit different. It could also be a reason maybe for you to get the 2023 model or decide to lease instead and try to get that do that leasing loophole with the commercial vehicle tax credit. I hope that answers that question for you, Diane. Hold on, I have Kristen who has her hand up first, and then Nina will get to you. So Kristen, do you want to go next?
Sure. I just wanted to respond. Somebody asked about installing chargers in your home. It's complicated, but I'll tell you what my experience has been. I put in two, one in a house in New York and one in a house where I am right now in California. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on if you have power going to the place where you're going to charge already, or you have to bring a line from your panel. It depends on what your electrician charges, because they, of course, for everything, they charge different amounts. But basically, you're bringing a line straight from your panel out to your charger. It has to carry 50 amps. And then you have to find a place to install it. You decide whether you want it outside or inside. Then you have to buy the charger itself. The installation of the plug in New York, I already had electricity on site in my garage. It was already 50 amps. So it cost me about $1,300 altogether. In California, I had to bring the line to my garage. It cost $2,300. That does not include the charger itself. We bought the charger on Amazon. You can get a pretty good charger for $400, $500. This is pricey. I mean, we're talking serious money, but being able to charge at your home makes life so easy. I have saved so much time. I just plug the charger in. I charge it at night when I get low rates on my electricity. It's ready in the morning. It's completely good to go. I have, as you can see, a BMW i3. I get about 230-mile range on a full tank, plus an i3, if you know, has an auxiliary gas tank, 2 gallons. So I can read it, the gas tank, it runs completely on battery, but the gas motor recharges the battery. So I hardly ever use it, but that gives me my range. But I charge and I can go all day. And I have not been to a gas station in years. I have not been to a public charger actually in a while, only when I take trips. And I took this car from New York City to Portland, Maine. And I also took it from New York to Washington, DC, no problem. No problem. I love these cars. I cannot believe why more people don't get these cars. And if you buy them used, they're really not that expensive. And because they're battery, you don't have to worry about all the problems with used cars. You know, it's a battery. What's going to go wrong with the battery? So to me, the big mystery is why we don't have even more support for EVs. I think the government's not doing enough to help people understand. The government's not doing enough to insist on an infrastructure of chargers. I think we need to do a lot more. I'm the chair of the environmental committee in my town, and we're really working on trying to educate people on EVs and chargers and making it more comfortable. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but I hope that's helpful. Getting a charger is worth it. It's like the car itself. It's cost up front, but you save in running it. Like that, the charger is a cost up front, but it really pays for itself in the long run, and it adds to the value of your home. It's become a popular thing. You know, you can put it, if you list your home, if you're going to sell, you put EV charger. And it makes people think that your whole home is up to date. Okay, I hope that helps.
That was fantastic. Thank you for that. We really appreciate it. And the prices that you were mentioning of installing charging at home is generally what we tell people. So I'm glad to know that that aligns with your experience as well. Before I move to Nina, I just want to say thank you to Ezra. He fact checked me in the comments. So I forgot that the Hyundai Ioniqs are not eligible for the regular clean vehicle tax credit. They're actually, you could get them for the commercial vehicle tax credit if you lease though. So I just forgot because there's so many different moving pieces. So sorry about that. I just wanted to point it out. But Nina, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I have just a week ago got the Hyundai Ioniq 6. And I love it. But the rebates, although the federal didn't qualify for federal rebate, I discovered that the dealer, and I think it's pretty universal, is giving $2,500 off the top, and then Hyundai USA is offering another either $5,000 off if you pay cash, or $2,500 plus a loan rate of 0% or 1.99%, very, very low if you pay within 2 years, and 0.199 APR for up to 60 months of credit of loan. So you end up saving. They're trying to match the 7,500 federal, and it did qualify. I live in Massachusetts, so it did qualify for the state rebate of 3,500. So it becomes very competitive with the Teslas, which I was also looking at, because Teslas do have the full rebate, both federal and US.
Yeah. And so this kind of actually goes along with another question that was in the chat, was just why are the Hyundais my favorite? Because I think they're pretty. But also, I've always had a small car, so I really like the Ioniq 6, even though I do technically want a bigger car, but I still really like the Ioniq 6. And it has like such a great range. You could have up to 360 miles of range in the 6, which is just fantastic. Plus, it's like both of them are super roomy on the inside compared to what they look like on the outside. So there's like tons of leg room for like, you know, for you in the front and people in the back. And it's just like, it just feels really spacious. Also, I think the ride is really like smooth. I think it's really smooth. And then I mean, I have an older car because, you know, I'm gonna wait till that dies before I get my EV, but like they have those perforated seats, which I didn't know were a thing, where you can have like the AC or like the heat come out of. And the first time I drove in a car like that, it was the Ioniq 5, and I was like, this is, I want this. Like, this is nice. So those are some of the reasons why they're my favorites.
They have a really big trunk too.
Yes, they do, which is super nice. Emily, go ahead.
We don't have a garage. We've lived in our house for 40 years, and it's on a small road in Westford. And we have a charging station next to our driveway, which is dirt. And we did have an electrician put it in, and they had to update our panel, which needed anyway, because we've lived in our house for 40 years. But it's definitely something that you want a professional to do, and it's wonderful having it at home. When we bought the Ioniq, we have 2 years of free charging through Electrify America. So we try and do that as much as we can, but we often charge at home. And we also bought an induction stove, and we have heat pumps and mini splits. So we have a carbon-free house at this point. And I would highly recommend going with heat pumps. Just parenthetically, you can go through Mass Save and get an energy audit, and then you can go to Mass Heat Smart Alliance and get a coach that'll come to your house, a volunteer, just a civilian, and help you with heat pumps, which is really great. And the induction stove, oh my gosh, absolutely love it. We had to wait 6 months for it. We had to pay for it up front. I don't think that's, again, a supply chain issue now, but it's absolutely fabulous.
I wanted to bring up something just in case folks are thinking about buying a car like this year versus next year. So, for you Tesla owners, this doesn't affect you or people thinking about Tesla, but most manufacturers now have done an agreement with Tesla to use their charging network. And what that means is, yes, this will open sometime in 2024 to all of these cars who are under these manufacturers to use Tesla's charging network, which is awesome. But come 2025, for most manufacturers, these cars will be built with the Tesla port or the NACS port installed in them. So if you want to wait because of that, that might be something to consider. But really, charging is just going to get even better for everybody pretty soon because there's just going to be so much more charging available just with the Tesla charging network alone. And that's not even including like all the money coming from the federal government and different state utilities that are being used for charging infrastructure projects. So just something to consider. Okay, just going through the chat to see if there's anything else. Okay, this one says, is the used EV credit going to be available at the dealer in 2024 like it will be for the new EVs? And that is yes. So the used credit is actually $4,000 or 30% of the purchase price with whichever is lower. But I believe for the used credit, you have to make $75,000 or more, or less, sorry. And I believe the car has to be at least 2 years old and be $25,000 or less. So just something to keep in mind. Does anyone have any question they want to ask verbally while I'm going through the chat? No, Wendy?
I have just an ignorant question. I really don't know. If you are at a charging station and due to safety or due to the cold weather, can you sit in the car and run the car while it's charging?
That's 99% of the time. That's what I end up doing. I just sit in my car, play on my phone. Because a lot of the times if you're driving and you're stopping, there's only so many coffees you can have. So I'll sit in my car and just either play on the screen, play games, play on my phone, whatever it may be, and then have the heat or the AC on. Yeah.
Does that significantly slow down the time for charging?
Not with charge. So there's it kind of leads to another question. When you're charging, there's kind of this sweet spot between like 20 and 80%. And on either tail end, it does slow down a lot. But if I'm using just like a heated seat while I'm charging, I don't see much of a drain as I charge now. Good question though.
How someone described what Amy was just talking about to me is that charging your car is like pouring a glass of water. Fast charging. This doesn't apply to level 2 or level 1. So if you imagine pouring a glass of water, right? When you first start pouring and the glass is empty, you can pour really fast. But when you get close to the top, you have to slow down so you don't spill over. And so that's what happens with fast charging is once you get to about 80%, it slows down how fast it's charging your car. So if you're planning on a road trip, what I do is the first leg of the trip for me is going to be the longest because I'm going to start off at 100% when I leave my driveway. And then the next legs are going to be shorter because at those stops, I'm only going to charge to, around 80, maybe a little over 80%.
Yeah, and something that's pretty fun with these cars as well is I drive from the Bay Area up to Tahoe. And, obviously it's a climb for a long time because you're climbing up Donner, up to the pass and kind of getting up and over. And so when I leave the house, if my car is full, I make a stop at an EV Go station. So there's a few stations along the way as I get closer to the top, and I kind of learned this pretty quickly. I'll stop for 15 or 20 minutes, which the reality is you're supposed to stop anyway. You know, your car is going to tell you it's time to take a break, right? Because it's a health hazard to be sitting in the same position for multiple hours at a time. So we're supposed to get out and move our bodies and circulate. So, you know, even stopping, sometimes we don't want to, you know, anytime we go up there because we just want to get there, especially in the winter. But I'll stop for 15, 20 minutes, take a break, plug the car in because I just need enough to get up and over to get to my house because I've tried not to do that stop, but it just cuts it a little too close for comfort for me. But on the way home, I again am bad and I don't stop sometimes. I get home and I'll have 75 miles left in the car. And that's because as I'm coming down and I'm climbing down I'm going downhill for an hour. Basically, I'm generating power the whole way down. So it's in my best interest to almost not even fill the car up before I leave Tahoe, because if the car is full, then I'm just going to waste all that energy. But the regenerative braking on these cars, when you really start to drive and get to know them, you really get to know how the car performs and that you're basically creating power. So it's really fun. There's a lot of I would say a little bit of a gamification, we call it, when you're driving these vehicles, because you're like, oh, I'm at 4.2 miles per kilowatt, and oh wow, I'm only at 3 right now. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Or, you know, how are my kids driving? Are they not understanding how to, you know, use the regen? So it's actually quite fun because you become very aware from your ability to be efficient. And then also when you're charging your car. So we actually, we don't operate things in our house anymore. We just got solar, so we're running off renewable as much as we can with our car as well. But it's just it's really cool. Like, you just sort of, your habits start to change and you sort of adapt and learn. So there's some fun besides just driving, kind of a fun technology. There's learning about it as well is really fun, and it's not super complicated. And you adapt over time.
Another tip, if you're when it's cold out and you're about to embark on a long road trip, precondition your car. So while it's plugged in, you turn the car on about, I don't know, half an hour before you plan to leave. For me, that's usually like when we plan to leave is, you know, we actually leave like half an hour later. But and that way you're using the electricity from your house to warm up your battery, and if you turn the heat on, to also warm up the cabin of your car, so then you don't use that electricity from your battery when you start off on your road trip. So that gives you a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, I saw someone ask about being in a cold weather climate and not having a garage. And so, like in my car, there's a setting and I can have it set to be at a specific temperature at a certain time every day. So like my kids are going to school, it can be at 75 degrees by 8 a.m. And as long as it's plugged in, as Janice said, it will precondition itself. So in a cold weather climate like that, you can kind of jump in your car and go when you need to, which is really cool.
So this works out well because we're actually doing a webinar next month on winter driving. So I will send a link out in our follow-up email, because I'm going to follow up with everybody and send like links and the recording of this presentation and everything. So I'll send it all to you. And if anyone wants to be a panelist on that webinar, you just let me know, because it'll be me talking for a while, but then we ask for people to give firsthand experiences as well.
And it's a hot topic for sure.
It's a very
you can
hot.
imagine on the bus and the big truck side of the world, it's cold weather does definitely degrade your range for sure. So but you plan for it. I call it, instead of range anxiety, I call it range reality, and just becomes, what is our reality on what we can do in our vehicles every day. So
Yeah. Amy has a great way of explaining it, and how it's just like gradual, like the weather doesn't change overnight. Like it's
Yeah.
cool.
And that was one of the things I was most scared about, because everyone talks about how your battery is just not going to perform. I'm a baby and I want the heated steering wheel, the heated seats, the heat blasting. And so I was concerned going from, you know, having all this battery range to dropping to nothing. But you just kind of adjust. It's just like as the temperature changes and you slowly change your clothes, like maybe you take a jacket today and then you take it off midday. You slowly acclimate. So you're not going from whatever 200 miles of range to 50 miles of range. Not that I would drop that low, but it's not like a instant. It happens over time and you just kind of react. It would be same thing with a combustion car. You know, you're doing the heated steering wheel and the heat's pumping and you're turning it on a half an hour early before you leave. So it's everything's heated up. You're still using more gas there. So it's not that scary.
And your EV, I call the congested urban centers, like where we're driving in traffic, that's like an EV's playground. And so that's really a huge value, because if you think about, how we burn fuel, there's a lot of parallels with our gas cars and our EVs when it comes to using our auxiliary power, you know, using our radio and the heat and all of that. But when you're actually in traffic, it's a totally different ball game. And that's where your car is just super, it can be much more efficient than its gas cousin. So.
And I will say, going from a Chevy Bolt to a Kia Niro EV, having the heat pump has just made a world of difference in the winter. And I think I suspect that's going to be more and more common in EVs as they make more of them.
Yeah, is that like the liquid? It's the liquid cooling of the batteries and the components in the car. It really kind of keeps the car at a very ambient type of temperature, and it does really create a lot of efficiency. And I think the Leaf originally didn't have that, and then they, I'm pretty sure, I don't remember what model year, but then they did move to that type of battery management system, and it definitely helps with the life cycle of the battery as well as the efficiency of when we're using it. So it's a little more costly, I think, for today, but the premium in that means you've got probably a longer life of a car, right? And that's even better.
All right, so I'm gonna switch back over to the chat, and Ezra has been diligently answering everything for the most part, but I feel like why not voice it out loud anyways and see if there's any more comments that we could add. So this question is from Vivian, and it says, hey, I am totally illiterate in EVs, brand new to this, looking for an EV using the federal tax break that ends this year. It actually doesn't end this year, so it's continuing until 2032. But want to know important terms for research, i.e. with combustible engines. I look at miles per gallon when thinking about efficiency. What's the term that's similar for EVs, miles per charge? I want to know how much it costs for a fast charge, for example, on a Tesla when the battery is almost dead. So I'm just going to kick it off, and then whoever wants to answer afterwards, please feel free. So I would recommend, if you want to use our EV shopping tool, so you can go on the Drive Green website, greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen. You will find front and center of that page a link that will lead you to our shopping tool. And on the shopping tool, each card is dedicated to a specific car, and we have fast facts that you could look for. So you'll look for miles per gallon electric, which is like the MPG equivalent for electric vehicles. You also have things like efficiency at level 2 and DC fast charging levels and how fast they can potentially charge. That can get a little bit tricky because the actual quickness of the way things can charge is also based on like how powerful the station is and how much your car can accept. We also include things like the federal tax credit that's available for that car, if any. And we are an organization based in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, so we will have, like, if there's either of those state rebates available. And so those are some of the things that we definitely put on there. Also range of the car. And one thing you definitely want to look out for in range is that we'll have a list of the range. So maybe say it's like 220 to 306 miles. That doesn't mean that car, whatever car you can get the maximum of 306 miles. That means within that car, there are trim levels. And at one trim level, you'll get 220 miles, and maybe at the highest level trim, you get 306 miles. So it's something that you have to look out for. Just see what if each trim has the same amount of range that you're looking for. I've talked too much. Anyone else have anything else? Oh,
I
Jenna.
would just add, I would just add that I was comparing what it costs to charge my car with what it would cost to charge to get fuel up like a Toyota Corolla, for instance. And I worked out that for a level 2 charge, most places, on public chargers where I have to pay for it, pay those rates, it's like the equivalent of like $2 per gallon of gas. And then for like the faster level 3 chargers, it's the equivalent of like $4 per gallon of gas. But I usually only use those when I'm going on long trips. So it's generally much cheaper with an EV than it would be with a combustion vehicle.
And I will say Ezra does a really great job at updating our fuel costs page. And so we kind of figure out how much it costs per mile to run on electricity than on gasoline. Generally speaking, it is, well, in New England, we have very high electricity rates. So even with our high electricity rates, it is still cheaper to run a mile on electricity than gasoline by, I think it's usually about 5 cents, at least it is for right about now. Last winter was weird because it was like on par with gas rates because electricity rates went sky high. But that is not the case anymore. So just something to think about. And if you want to learn more about that and like the math that we've done, it's on our website, and that's also a link that I can include in the follow-up email.
If you are in Massachusetts and you're considering getting a Kia, Niro EV is the Niro the only EV brand of Kias? If you're thinking of getting a Kia, I recommend buying it at a dealership outside of Massachusetts. And the reason why is because Kia doesn't allow you to have the smartphone, the app with your phone in Massachusetts. But anywhere outside of Massachusetts, it allows you to have that. And it's, from what I can tell, it's their like reaction to the right to repair bill that was passed a few years ago. And so they're like, well, we're just not going to give any information to our customers in Massachusetts. So technically, if you live in Massachusetts, you're not supposed to have that. But I've heard of people who live in Massachusetts and bought their cars outside of Massachusetts and they were able to get the app. Unfortunately, I didn't know that when I bought mine. So I don't have the phone app. And the phone app is so helpful because you can be in your house and see how many miles you have, figure out if you need to charge, if you're plugged in. You can just go ahead and start charging it. You can adjust the how much you charge up until. So usually I don't charge to 100% because batteries don't like to really sit at 100%. I charge to 90%, but you can make adjustments like, you're going on a road trip and you want to up the 90% to 100%. If you have the app, you can just do it on your phone versus me. My driveway is like behind my backyard. So I have to like walk all the way out to my car and get in the car, turn on the car and do it. So that's a pain.
I had never heard of that. Kia only has one other car right now, which is the EV6. It's a cute little car. So two potential options. Another question from Vivian is about maintenance costs. So she's trying to figure out maintenance costs. She says, I understand there is nothing to consider for oil changes, but what are maintenance costs to expect? I'm thinking power steering fluids.
Air filters.
The filters
That's
are the big, yeah.
Yes. There's just far fewer things to maintain, and I've been on enough of these calls where people just are like, oh, I get my tires rotated just to make sure they're good there. And then they top up any fluids needed. So it's definitely costs you a lot less in maintenance costs over time, which means like the lifetime costs of the car are a lot less for you.
Even something like brakes, you're not using brakes as much because it's the regenerative braking, so there's less wear and tear in those as well.
And then someone's asking for any recommendations for dealers in Rhode Island. It really depends what you're looking for, and I'll leave it at that. Depends what you're looking for. So if you have any questions about that further, feel free to email me back when I send the follow-up email.
There was a question in the chat. If you live in Massachusetts but buy your car out of state, do you still get the 3,500 rebate?
Yes, you do. That is only for the more EV standard rebate, which is like the rebate for the new cars. For the used cars, I believe it has to be a Massachusetts dealer. In Rhode Island, it has to be from a Rhode Island dealer, with the exception of there's a list of Massachusetts dealers on the Office of Energy Resources website, which houses the Drive EV rebate program. And also, if the car that you want is at a dealership that's not at one of those listed Massachusetts dealerships, you can contact the Office of Energy Resources for an exception. And I think they will most likely make the exception. Okay. I have some comments about grocery stores. And then we have a question about how is the NEVI rollout going in New England? That's referring to the infrastructure dollars coming from the federal government. So Massachusetts has a lot more funding than Rhode Island, and they're doing a whole lot more charging stations right now. I know that in Rhode Island, they're focusing on two places that already have some stations and like really bulking them out. One is the Park and Ride in Warwick, and the other one is in Westerly. So like the middle of the state and the southernmost tip of the state. So it's coming. It might just take a few years before you notice a significant difference. Okay, Ezra, is there any other question you think we should answer from the chat?
I did want to answer, Dee Dee asked about CCS and J1776, and I just wanted to clarify that J1776 allows for level 1 charging, and the CCS is an extension of that. So it is one adapter. She was asking about a Tesla using a different, like a non-supercharger network, so non-Tesla network. And that adapter would allow a NACS, which is a Tesla car, to charge at a non-Tesla station. It's a J1776 //CCS adapter. That is one type of adapter. It is not two separate adapters. There's no J1176 and a CCS. It is just an extension. I tried to explain that over the chat, but I'm not sure if it was clear.
Do you mean the J1772?
Sure, yeah, sorry.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'm not.
Sorry, yeah, I don't know why I said 6, but yeah, 2, same answer though with CCS.
Okay. So just to give that some context too for like non-Tesla drivers who haven't had the experience of the North American Charging Standard port yet, all non-Tesla cars have for the most part 2 ports. So one for level 1 and level 2 charging, and then a second port for DC fast charging, whereas Tesla or the NACS port has 1 port for all 3 levels of charging because they're really fancy like that. So that's just something to know. Susan, you have your hand up.
Just a quickie, I haven't seen the last question answered. The issue with insurance companies of buying out of state. I mean, we have commerce. Can anyone talk to that issue?
I mean, people buy cars out of state all the time, so I don't think that should be an issue as far as insurance goes. I personally can't talk of my own experiences on the matter, but I do know plenty of people who have bought cars out of state. Does anyone else have any feedback or comments on that?
I didn't buy out of state from Mass. I'm in Rhode Island, and just because of the Tesla network, I ended up having to purchase my car in Jersey. And then came back, and I haven't had an issue. It's just registered to my house.
Okay, Linda, go ahead.
I ran into the issue of getting a used vehicle through my brother, but it was out of state. The first thing they asked when I said I was getting a vehicle because I was getting rid of the other one was, is it from a dealership out of state? And I go, no, it's my brother got it and I have to go purchase it from him. So when it's a person to person out of state, it's okay. But when it's from a dealership out of Massachusetts, it was a no. That means you have to return the car back to the dealership, and you already lost everything once you have to do that. So I don't know if that's still an issue here in Massachusetts or not, but that I ran into that like over 5 to 7 years ago. I was like, good grief. It makes things more difficult no matter which way you turn. So it's my other issue is when it comes to EV vehicles, our infrastructure is not up to par yet. So if you live in a residential area where you don't have your own private driveway and you're on street parking, you can all forget it. Why? Nobody wants to put an extension cord from their home to on-street parking. Nobody. And I understand that you want to go to charging station. That's all well and fine. But when you're used to putting gas in a car that takes like less than 7 minutes, and you have to wait more than that at a charging station, it makes me a little more reluctant. Other than right now, I don't have the revenue for it, but it puts me on pause.
So just to kind of like a little rebuttal there. So we have had many people who owned EVs, like who live in apartment complexes and things like that, who obviously, so they didn't have access to charging at home. So what they do is they go to places like grocery stores and gyms or wherever they're going to go on their normal commutes and daily errands anyways, and they charge at those places. And that has been enough to sustain them to do what they need to do for charging. So it's all about like how you think about it. Because it's less than 7 minutes for charging if you're just going to plug it in and then go about your errands and then just take it out once you're ready to go. It like takes you 2 seconds to just go hook up. So it shouldn't be that much of a difference. The only thing is if you don't have charging stations at your normal grocery stores or your normal gyms or wherever it may be that you habitually go to. So it's just something to consider. And also like maybe your workplace will have it. Not all workplaces do, but as the years go on, you'll see more workplaces that have charging stations available. And so you'll be parked there throughout the entirety of the workday and easily can charge up a couple times a week. And that should mitigate that.
Okay. What I find annoying is they have parking spaces for those who have EV vehicles. I understand that. But if you don't have a charging port there, it's like it defeats the purpose because it's annoying for those who even for those who have handicap placards.
Well, usually they do. I haven't seen too many that don't, but that's okay. So I just want to wrap us up today because we are about at time. So any of our EV ambassadors, is there anything else you want to say quickly to just round us out? Or are you happy to let me end this?
I'll say one thing for anyone who's vacillating between buying an EV or buying a combustion engine car is if you think about like 5 or 10 years down the road and trying to sell a gas car, you're going to probably have a hard time selling it because the world is transitioning to EVs. So might as well jump on the train now.
There you go. I think that's a great way to send us off. So thank you to everybody, and especially EV ambassadors, for joining us here today. I will be in touch the next day or so with the follow-up email, and we look forward to seeing you all at a future webinar. Thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.